welcome everyone to this webinar. And it's great to see that again, many of you take the time to join this webinar. I know AI is a very hot topic, and I know you're all into carbon accounting and sustainability reporting. So today we try to combine both and try to bring you some very concrete examples how we believe AI can help in speeding up carbon accounting, but also in broader sustainability reporting. And we are those three people. So for those who don't know me yet, I'm Kenneth. I'm one of the co-founders at Carbon+Alt+Delete, and today I'm overseeing our go-to-market. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Hans-Peter and by Jens. Hans-Peter, feel free to quickly introduce yourself to the audience.
Yes, good morning. My name is Hans-Peter. As Kenneth said, I'm also one of the co-founders of Carbon+Alt+Delete. I'm responsible for the product development and will also share a bit of our latest development when it comes to using AI in carbon accounting. And then I hand over to Jens.
Thank you, Hans-Peter. Hi everyone, my name is Jens. I'm the co-founder of Caromia, and we basically simplify the CSRD reporting using AI. So I'll be sharing more about this in a minute. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans-Peter. Thank you, Jens. And so on Carbon+Alt+Delete and on Caromia. So Carbon+Alt+Delete and Caromia are both software providers. We at Carbon+Alt+Delete, we focus on carbon footprinting, more specifically on corporate carbon footprinting. And we have a SaaS solution there that is exclusively used or aimed at sustainability consultants across Europe. Caromia, it's a software startup that focuses on broader CSRD reporting. So from that point, it's very synergetic. In full disclosure, there's no formal partnership or whatsoever between Carbon+Alt+Delete and Caromia. But I think it's interesting for the audience that you get different use cases on how AI is being used in sustainability reporting. So that's why we're very happy today to do this webinar together with Jens from Caromia. Before we dive into the content, some housekeeping rules. We're happy to have a very big audience. The downside of that is that the interaction will need to happen through the chat. So I invite you to, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A chat of the Teams environment. If the Q&A chat does not work, it sometimes happens that one is blocked by your local team settings, then feel free to just use the regular chat. But any question, remark that you have throughout the webinar, feel free to put it there. We do have a short Q&A towards the end, where we pick some important questions. Also feel free to vote for questions that you like or where you're also interested to get an answer. Your camera is switched off by default, and you're muted by default. Unfortunately, you cannot change them. That are the settings of the webinar. So please use the chat for your questions. One question I can already answer. Yes, we are recording the webinar, and yes, we will share both the recordings and the slides after the webinar, somewhere over the coming days. That being said, I think it's time to jump into the topic of today, which is AI. AI is basically everywhere, right? On your LinkedIn, on the newspaper, on every webinar that you might have followed, everything is about either sustainability reporting or AI. How do we look in Carbon+Alt+Delete at AI? So let me try to very shortly give a slightly nuanced image. Yes, AI is very much a buzzword, right? And when something is a buzzword, it's often overused, sometimes even misused. So there's definitely some use of AI more from a marketing point of view and less from a content point of view. And sometimes for some use cases, AI is still very much a solution, but looking for the underlying problem. AI is also by definition sometimes wrong. To put it very simple, AI looks for correlations, statistical relations between different parameters with a certain probability. The probability is never 100%, so by definition, it sometimes returns wrong results. And that's also why we believe that AI will for sure not replace humans in carbon accounting. It can help them save time, but there's always need for a human check at the end, also for legal liability reasons. Yes, I think an important point, in particular in the sustainability landscape, is on the energy consumption. AI is very energy intensive. Depending on where the electricity for the service come from, it can also go with a very high carbon footprint. So we should be careful. We should not underuse AI, but we should definitely not overuse AI for things that can perfectly be done without AI. That being said, from a technological point of view, we are today living in a different world than 2 years ago. Those large language models, LLM, think about ChatGPT and the like, that's really a technological game changer. And to give you one anecdote of that, what Hans-Peter will demo later in the webinar, we already experimented with that 4 years ago. And it took us a lot of time. We got into a lot of scalability issues. We basically parked it after a couple of months. But with the likes of the ChatGPT, it's now basically being done in an hour. And then Hans-Peter will nuance it and say it's still a bit more complex. But the point I want to make today with the current AI technology, you can really do things that you could not do 4 years ago. And still every 3 to 6 months, the underlying large language models are becoming better. So if you extrapolate the speed at which the technology is developing, you can only imagine of what might be possible in 1 to 3 years from now. And then linking it to where we see the main value and also where the use cases are today, it's about time saving. So as said, I don't think AI will replace humans, particularly not when it comes to the advisory part on sustainability that you all do. But it can save a lot of time, in particular on data collection and emission factor mapping. So for me, AI in sustainability, the first use case is about saving time of you, saving time of experts. And that's basically what we need to really deliver on sustainability reporting and make enough sustainability reporting capacity available to the market. So when we did the analysis, this is specifically for the carbon accounting market in Europe. You can have a similar story for the broader sustainability reporting market in Europe and beyond, but the trends are the same. So the market is growing quickly. More and more companies need it, right? We assess it with a factor 4 over 4 years. The question is, who will be able to help those companies? Part of it will come from experts, people being trained. That basically needs to double. So for every carbon expert that is out there today, we need 2 in 4 years from now. So that's a lot about training new people leaving university, but also people that are currently expert in adjacent fields like energy consultancy. But that means we still have a gap of a factor 2 that needs to be addressed by efficiency. So when we have twice the number of carbon experts in 4 years from now, per carbon expert, we need to do twice the work that that expert is doing today. So we need a huge step in efficiency, and part of that efficiency gain will come from AI saving time, in particular in data collection. And that brings us to the 3 use cases we want to address today. The first one is on finding the best emission factor. The second one is on reading activity data from invoices for carbon accounting. And then the third one is on sustainability reporting. The example Jens will show is for a CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive report. But before diving into those 3 use cases, I would like to have your opinion. So we've composed a small Menti. You can scan the QR code with your mobile phone, or you can go to menti.com and use the code that you see here on the slide. And the question is, how are you as a sustainability consultant or as a sustainability manager, if that's your role in the company, how are you looking at the role of AI in sustainability reporting? Are you skeptical? Don't you have a real opinion? Are you optimistic? Or are you afraid that it will replace you? I'll give you some time to answer that question and switch to the results. I see already some results coming in. Let's wait a couple more seconds for people to answer, but I think the trend is clear. It's good that at least you all have an opinion, with a big majority that it can deliver value. For the 17 people that are either skeptical or even afraid, feel free to also share your concerns or skepticism in the chat, right? We like to have a bit of discussion and interactivity. For the ones that are optimistic, we hope that you're still optimistic after this webinar, after you've seen the concrete use cases. So let's jump to that. The first one is finding the best emission factor in carbon accounting. So I guess most of you are familiar with carbon accounting, spend quite a bit of time looking for the right emission factor to be combined with activity data. Sometimes the data that you get from your clients are very vague, with a vague description on a specific product that they've procured. There are just a lot of emission factors out there. So we, in our database at Carbon+Delete, we have more than 100,000 of them. And sometimes also just not clear what the best emission factor is, right? You might have different options, and you need to pick one. And all of the above is in particular true for goods and services. So what we have done at Carbon+Delete, and use case that I will show, is that we use AI to find, we use a large language model to find the emission factor that best matches the description that you put into it. And best matches means that is statistically close. So basically, the words in your search term are close to the words that are being used in the name or the description of the emission factor. And the big additional advantage of that is that you can search in different languages. That basically comes off the shelf with those large language models. But it can also help you to be inspired about additional emission factors that you can use. So let me showcase that in the software. So I'm now in Carbon+Delete. So we have different emission factor databases. Let me use the one of EcoInvent, right? So if I look for aluminium plates, I get here quite a bit of emission factors. You see, I still get 41 pages of emission factors. In EcoInvent, so EcoInvent is a very broad database, and you see also this column here, similarity. So Hans-Peter can explain exactly what it means, but it basically an indication for how close the match is between your search term and the emission factor being found. The higher the similarity, the closer the match, and it's basically a percentage, right? So it's between 0, 0, and 1. If I now changed it to German, for instance, aluminium platte, you see it also works. So it's sector or language agnostic. Also took this example. So it's real life example, one of our data points in our database, used this very specific description, which is basically a head bolt being used or procured by a company. Of course, there is no explicit emission factor for that, but if you then start looking into EcoInvent for this specific material, you see indeed that you get keywords that are linked to steel, different types of steel. You see that the similarity is lower than the previous example, but at least you get emission factors that could work pretty well or that are at least a proxy for this concrete example. To wrap up the example, let me show you an electricity example from IEA. So I'm from Belgium, so let me try to find the emission factor for electricity for Belgium. I've put in the country name Belgique, the French name for Belgium. You see that it returns Belgium. It also returns the neighboring countries, so Netherlands and France, Luxembourg, France probably a bit lower. And it also returns Belarus, you could ask yourself why. It's probably because Belgium and Belarus are alphabetically close to each other. So probably on the broader internet, Belgium and Belarus are next to each other or close to each other in alphabetic country lists. And then as kind of a fun example to end, if I look for the emission factor of a country with a crazy president, you can guess what will show up. North Korea, United States, China. I don't know whether you agree or disagree, but just a bit as a fun example to end this first use case on finding emission factors with the AI-powered search. I don't know, Hans-Peter, before I give you the word on the next use case, you want to say anything on how it works exactly with vector search and so on?
Yes, I can maybe extend a bit on your example. So what we have done is for each of the emission factors, we compiled a context. And for most examples, it's containing the keyword, the detail, the category, and sometimes part of the description. For EcoInvent, we took also some data in from the extended description there and the comments. We compiled that. And in the same way, we also build a context with your search term, and then we transfer them into vectors, and we compare how close the vectors are, and that's basically the number that you see in the first column. So also in terms of the AI-powered search, it might help to give the search more context. So the example Kenneth gave before with Belgique, you could also try to say country _Belgium supplier and then the name of the supplier. So that might help the search. So it's a bit of learning and exploring how the search works and how to best return the results that you're looking for. So, yeah, that's the things that I want to add. And then maybe Kenneth, if you can just keep on sharing the slides, that would help.
Yes, absolutely. So, second use case. Hans-Peter, go ahead and tell me when I need to go to the next slide.
Yes, you can go to the next one. So as Kenneth said, and also from the experience that we get both in discussions with clients, but also in the support mailbox, data collection is still really a pain point when it comes to carbon accounting. The reasons are various, right? You have data not centrally available, not in the right format, long lead time, several iterations and versions, last minute changes. Luckily, these are for us, Carbon+Alt+Delete, these are often handled by you, but we also try to help you there. We have the request feature in the application, but we also want to improve you or help you with improving the data collection process when it comes to reading in the results, cleaning them, and like that improve the granularity and therefore also the data quality of your carbon accounting exercise. What I want to focus today is really on the data not centrally available and on the process format, right? These are really two things where we think we can help with the next feature that we will present. And yeah, Kenneth, maybe you can go a step. And also to give here a bit of motivation. So we believe that financial data is a single source of truth, and it should also be used in carbon accounting. We also strongly believe in activity-based carbon footprinting. When it comes to simulations, actions, and so on, spend-based carbon footprints are just not as good as activity-based carbon footprinting. And again, following on what Kenneth said, technology is really improving. We have written the feature in a way that we can always connect to the latest models, and even during development, we have already seen changes when we connected newer or the latest models, right? So that's really something that we want to continue working on. A bit the vision that we have is collecting invoices, collecting financial data that you have, process it, and carbon accountants can start from a 80% completed carbon footprint. As Kenneth said, expert knowledge will remain important. When it comes to assurance, humans need to confirm the data that was provided, right? So that's a bit the intro, and now also let me try to give a demo.
You could take over the screen, right, Hans-Peter?
Yes, I'll start sharing now. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm now also in the application. It's not the latest production version or the version that you have access to. It's more a current development version, but the feature that I will present will be live with the next release. So what we try to do is when it comes to import, we also want to support AI document screening. And the example I want to use, let me pull in here a file. So these is files that I got from my accountant. You might recognize it. These are just tickets from the fuel station that I have gathered. I was at a fuel station in Germany, but also in Belgium and so on. And let's just see what happens. So also that you get a feeling for how long it takes. Have a live demo, so things are high. So what we try to do now in the background is basically process the document, try to find the right activity category, and then also extract the information in the document in a structured form, right? And what you see here is about a process that takes less than a minute, I hope, for a document of 4 pages. So what you see now is that I've before concatenated 4 receipts for my fuel station, and you will see here information about the liters tanked, a bit more description, and since we cannot give a statistical information how close we are, we at least try to give some information about the motivation by the AI model selected certain elements. So you see the liters are correct, the dates are correct, and also the fuel and the origin has been found. So if I click on next, you get back in our familiar flow with the imports. We do a final check if we can map the found keywords on our database, and we can start importing the file. Final step. And we see here that the emissions have been calculated, all the keywords have been populated, and if I continue to our inventory, you will also see that the documents have been attached. So we have a complete workflow that starts from an invoice that you could get from your accountant that was used to gather financial information to also come to information for a carbon footprint. Let me try another example. So again, let me try maybe a flight data. So this is a flight ticket Kenneth provided. It's a flight with multiple steps. And also here we'll see what the result will be.
Yes, and then in the result, Hans-Peter,
Yeah.
can you show, for instance, what AI returns in terms of assessment of the quality? Because it's too small now on the screen, so either you zoom in or you can do it in the voiceover for this example or for the previous one. Perfect.
Is it better now?
Yeah. See what it will give.
All right. Again, 4 flights have been found, one from Brussels to Barcelona, and then from Barcelona to Gran Canaria. And then a bit of even the flight number. So question if you really want to have that information, but that's basically the potential that we see here. Again, the transport and the method derived from just the ticket. And then maybe also just to close with a fun fact. So this might look familiar to me. So this is a screenshot of the Excel that also works. Continue here. So again, the model works in 2 steps, tries to find the activity category, and then once the activity category has been determined, it uses the keywords and the details that link to your preferred emission factor data set and try to map those, right? So again, what we see here is that the activity category was identified as fugitive emissions, and then the substance was mapped on the ones that are also found in the application. You can go quite far, something I tried this morning. So this is a picture I took of my gas meter in the basement. Let's see what that gives.
Can you in this example stay on step 3, Hans-Peter? I think there are
Yeah.
2 questions in the chat that we can already answer based on a
Yeah.
concrete example. One question is, how does it work? So it works basically in 2 steps. One, we capture the activity data, and maybe Hans-Peter can say still a bit
Yeah.
more on how that happens exactly.
Yeah.
And then the activity data, in step 1, we capture the activity data and we structure it in our data model. And then in step 2, we just do the basic calculation, activity data times emission factor to calculate the emissions.
Exactly.
But
So
sorry, I
again,
interrupted your
yeah.
example. Go ahead.
So again, the motivation here, the image shows a gas meter reading of the cubic meters of the current state. Again, well, to be refined, this is not the yearly or monthly consumption. This is just a snapshot, but it already gives an indication where we could go with the models here. And then, as Kenneth said, we found the natural gas, and then also we said if you cannot find anything properly, just state yourself as unknown, properly some local gas supply, and then here again we have the data model of our emission factors, can match it on natural gas, not needing a detail, and then the unit, right? So that's a bit the flow that we foresee here.
There was a question, Hans-Peter, where does the AI model reasoning field come from? So in that step 3?
That's part of the model response that we ask for. So we have basically, we provide the answers that we want. So we want obviously these fields that match our data model. And then we also say, can you reason a bit why you have selected certain values, right? So that's.
But with very limited guidance, right? It just
there's
tell us
hardly
why,
any
and then
guidance. Hardly any guidance, no.
Good.
And also we have explored multiple models, again, looking at data protection. So all the models are now run within our AWS environment using models that are hosted on AWS. So all the data remains within Europe, quite sensitive topic from time to time. And like that, we basically can ensure that no data is leaked to other providers, right?
And I'm keeping an eye on the chat. Maybe already one
Yeah.
final question before we move to Jens is on whether you can say something on how good it works for different activities based on the tests that we have already done, including scope 3 goods and services.
Yeah. So to be fully transparent, we are surprised ourselves how good it works with the little guidance that we give. It works very well for scope 1, scope 2 for sure. Scope 3, the matching of emission factors is a different use case. We also had a different use case here in the webinar. Where it struggles from time to time is to determine if an electricity invoice is really scope 2 electricity or scope 3 use of electricity, for example. But again, here the knowledge of the consultant is important, and it's also a different scope of information, I would say. Yeah. So what we will also do now, so we will make this feature available to users. We will also kind of check what values here are often changed. So that's information that we can use, and then basically fine tune the model as we speak. So we try also there to then further elaborate on the model. Yeah.
And maybe then to add my 2 cents, right? So if you go back to the intro, what we've said, like, look, we need to double the capacity. No, we need to double the efficiency in carbon accounting. a lot of that we believe will come from this, right? And the vision of screening all the invoices overnight and having 80% of the carbon footprint ready in the morning, it will come through this functionality, but we are definitely not yet there today. We know it's a process, step by step, and we also want to take our users on that process. And I think two things still need to change. On the one hand, the technology, the underlying large language model will become better, and there we can just follow what the ChatGPTs and the Anthropics of this world will do. A second big question is also what the user, what the sustainability consultant still wants to double check, and where he or she can fully rely on the AI. And that's something that we will need to learn together with our users. So that's also why we're launching this pretty early. It will be beta. We will actively look for feedback and improve from there. So for instance, today you can only screen one document at a time, not yet a bulk upload of hundreds or thousands of invoices. There is no reason why that could not, there is no technical limit that we don't do it. It's more making you familiar with the tool and us more familiar with how it works. So that may be as an overall high level reflection. Anything to add on that, Hans-Peter?
No, that's perfect summary.
Great. Very good. And then Jens, more than happy to give you the floor, and you can still take your 20 minutes. We have already addressed some questions, so we can shorten the Q&A a bit. So feel free to share your screen and walk us through the example of CSRD reporting.
Right. Thanks a lot, Kenneth, Peter. Maybe I'll first start with a few slides to introduce the topic and introduce the challenge that we're tackling. So I'll assume that most of you know what the CSRD is all about. So it's a directive that forces companies in Europe to report on ESG in line with the ESRS. And so that's already a lot of abbreviations, but I assume that you know most of that. At first sight, when companies are confronted with the challenge of CSRD, they see it as a data problem. And it's also understandable where that reflection comes from, because as such, a company will be confronted with hundreds, if not more than 1,000 data points that need to be reported on. And those data points are narratives or semi-narratives. And that information that they need to fill out in the CSRD report, it is something that they typically don't have very well structured in the organization. It is information that typically resides in different departments in unstructured formats across different topics, spread over different divisions, coming from different value chains. So they see this really as a data problem that is very hard to crack. Now, in practice, what we see that it's typically a very lengthy and an involved process that starts with a double materiality assessment to identify the impacts, risks, and opportunities, following a gap assessment, which is easing into the report writing. It's identifying what are the data points that we need to report on, where do we have that information, who has that information, etc. To then eventually start to write the CSRD report. And that's where we see that a lot of companies really hit the wall because it's quite challenging and a lot of work. And that's where a lot of people start to get involved, but it's also where a lot of people start to become quite frustrated about this because often this comes on top of their day-to-day job. And then we're confronted with a process that easily takes many months, in some cases over a year. Then we ask ourselves the question, can we do better? Can we do better using AI? And that's what we set out to do. And that's basically what we've done. Yes, it is better, and it is so much more efficient if we start to use AI in this process. We basically do two things. We do a double materiality assessment, and we automate this to the maximum. When I say to the maximum, it's to the point where we follow the EFRAG guidelines, where the client will still learn a lot from the process, that we still reap all the benefits from the DMA, but that we remove all of the tasks that are tedious, that take quite a bit of time, and that don't necessarily add a lot of value. The next step is basically creating the CSRD report. And we do this from unstructured information, which is provided to the platform, to then create the CSRD report itself and basically pre-fill as much of the data points as possible. And on that CSRD report, then perform a fit gap assessment. We see that our clients, they are able to then complete this entire process in about 4 months, which makes us very happy, because it means that they have a lot of time available to make their businesses more sustainable, because this is actually what it's all about. Sustainability managers, they should not waste time on creating a report. Reporting is important. It's important for transparency reasons, etc. But as such, action still needs to happen in the field, and that's very important that time and energy goes to that. So in essence, what we do is we go from a typical process-oriented solution that you're probably aware of is, okay, we have a data point that we need to report on. Who has that information? Okay, let's assign the task to this person. And then that person will be confronted with the data point, the legal text, and then trying to figure out where do you have the information, and then needs to provide an answer to that. That's the old model. Now we're actually looking at a new solution, which is more knowledge-centered and is basically able to understand the organization and is then able to provide the answer to the CSRD report. Let's take some examples. First, the double materiality assessment. So where do we use AI in that process? Well, the beginning of the starting point basically of a double materiality assessment is to identify those IROs, those impacts, risks, and opportunities. So in order to do this properly, you need to be very exhaustive, and you need to make sure that you assess your organization across the value chain. That is often quite of a stretch that you need to do in terms of mental brain capacity on being exhaustive. So what we do is we basically use AI in that process, and we use 2 inputs for this. First, it's the context of the company and the description of the value chain. So we need to have a good understanding from the company itself. This can be input, which is basically provided to us in the forms of documents, but also in the form of a description provided by the company. Then there's a second element that we infuse into this, which is a lot of public and scientific knowledge, because there is a ton of information out there, but there's just the challenge of bringing all of that together. But when we do, we can actually create IROs which are very relevant for the company and for the clients. Typically, we'll generate a few hundred IROs across the different ESRS topics, and that's generated in a matter of hours. All of those IROs, they come with extra details and analysis of where does it happen in the value chain, on what term does it manifest itself, what is the link with human rights, for example. And we can also apply the IFRA subscore mechanisms already based on the publicly available scientific knowledge out there. So there can be a very profound automated analysis already on the IROs. Now, this is a quite new, perhaps a rather unconventional method, but it's a method that has been approved by all of the auditors with all of our clients, including all of the big 4. So it is definitely helping companies and clients in order to do this more efficiently. Then the question is, okay, is it how much time and energy do you still put into this, right? So it basically takes about 2 hours of effort in order to give all of the right context and input to the machine in order to obtain those IROs. Obviously, it's a long list of IROs which is generated. It also means that we need to get to a short list, so there is a review needed. So that's where the AI will definitely not replace the consultant and the sustainability manager, but it will make the job more efficient and will speed up the process quite significantly. Now let's take a look at some examples for the CSRD report. Here, we take the example of VRT, and VRT is a regional broadcaster in Belgium, and on their website they have an annual report, and in that annual report they talk a lot about their financials, but also about their social impact. And what we've done is we've basically taken this public report from the website, we've uploaded it to the platform, and we've asked the Caromia platform to generate the CSRD report on S1. And what we can see is that within that report that VRT has on the website today, is that we're able to pre-fill about 77% of the CSRD report on S1. So what it does, it shows that clients, that companies typically have a lot of the data already available that they need to report on in CSRD. The biggest challenge is that you need to understand what it is that you need to report on, and you need to understand what you already do and have as a company. And that's where AI can really bring huge efficiency gains into the process. Another example is VodafoneZiggo. There they have a similar report on their website available. We've done the same thing, but a few hours later, we basically pre-filled the CSRD report with about 82%. We've done the same thing for Sioen, which is a smaller company, more the size of an SME, a fabric manufacturer. We're able to fill a bit less. Nonetheless, it's almost 70% that we're able to fill based on the information which they already have and report on today. So it shows that companies, they typically have a lot of information. So if they have that information, that we don't want to waste too much time on understanding, rehashing that, and putting that into the right structure. So that's where we can bring huge efficiency gains. So perhaps I will share a different screen so that we can actually go to a small demo. So bear with me. So what we've done as well is we've taken an example from Carbon+Alt+Delete. So Kenneth was so nice to provide a carbon footprint report. It's a fake one, so it's not a real organization. So it's basically for demo purposes. So it's the Carbon+Alt+Delete ACME report that we use in order to generate part of the CSRD reports. So what we've done is we uploaded this and we asked to generate the CSRD report more specifically on E1. And what we can see is that 26 of the data points out of the 123 that we want to report on, they're complete. Meaning that from the perspective of the ESRS, all of the information that we need to report on, we were able to retrieve it from the carbon footprint report and we fill it out completely. Meaning that the only action that remains is for consultant to read, to validate, and make sure that all the information is there from the perspective of the client. Okay. From the perspective of the ESRS, the information is there, and that's how we tag it basically as complete. And then obviously there's still some data points that are incomplete, where we did not have all of the information needed to have the data point answered in full. Now, if we zoom in a bit more on this, so here we have the structure. So here we're zooming in on the report. So here we're looking at E1, we're looking at E16, where we look at the different scopes of the emissions. So underneath this disclosure requirement, there are data points that need to be filled. And you can immediately see the table structure that we apply automatically, and you see that this one is tagged incomplete, because there's still a lot of data points that need to be filled. But there are some data points that are clearly filled. So your scope 1 emissions, scope 2 emission location-based, scope 2 emission market-based, scope 3, and total emissions. So this is information that was filled automatically from the provided report. And if we go back to the report that was provided by Kenneth, we'll see that here, the consolidated statement of the greenhouse gas emissions, that this data is actually provided here in this table as well, and that we were able to pick up on this. So your scope 1 emissions, scope 2 emissions, market-based, location-based, and then scope 3 emissions. The scope 3 emissions, you see here that, that they're split across upstream and downstream. But then if you look at the structure which is provided by the SRS, then basically it can be reported consolidated. So going further into the scope 3 emissions, there is extra detail here that can be filled in as well. So where do we find that information? Again, it's in the report that we are able to fill in all the details that are found here in this table that are then being picked up and also filled in the reporting structure. So all of the information that a company has can then obviously be used to pre-fill the report as much as possible. Here, if you look at the methodologies, the next data point where we are talking about the methodologies, then we can see that all of the information that needs to be reported on is actually available in the report itself already. So we're able to pick up the different pieces of information from the report, and all of the information is there. And you can see that we're picking it up from the report, and we're basically picking up the information from pages 5 to 12. So that makes it also very easy to audit and to validate that this is the correct information. Now, scrolling down a bit further, we see that there is on the disclosures of types of contractual instruments as part of the scope 2 emissions, that this is incomplete. So here we see that there is a missing element spotted. That's basically the types of contractual instruments that are basically being used. But we notice that there is quite some analysis already provided. So what we see is that there was reasoning on this, because the AI actually picked up that there is a huge discrepancy between market-based emissions and location-based emissions. And that basically indicates as well that, that there are probably efforts that are undertaken by the company in order to manage this. So the AI picks up that there is potentially something that can be reported on in this direction of what this data point is actually looking for. There is another test that we've done on S1 and G1, and this we've done with Belfius. Belfius is a big bank in Belgium, and they also have an annual report on their website. I have the example here, where they talk a lot about many different things. If you look a bit, if you scroll down a bit further, I think it was on page 9, that it basically highlights the different elements that they talk about. So you see there's about a few pages that talk about sustainability. There's a few pages that talk about human resources. And so we use this information as well to generate the CSRD report. And we've done this based on this report, and we've done it for S1 and G1. You see that we were able to pre-fill a lot more for S1 and for G1. So for S1, we're able to pre-fill for 51 data points out of the 93. And then the G1, 10 data points out of the 50. Now, if we zoom in a bit more, and we start looking at what was provided, then we see that for the first disclosure requirements and material impacts, risks, and opportunities, we can actually see that the first data point is incomplete. So we're not able to pre-fill it. Why? Because it probes for the materiality assessment, which is not provided in this report. So as such, we cannot report on it conclusively. So basically, it is a missing element which is attached to this data point. So that's where either you still have to provide the answer manually or upload the DMA report so that it can be filled automatically. The next data point, however, the next data point, we're able to fill it in completely, meaning there is no missing elements. And we were able to fill it with information from the annual report, going from page 6 to 23 to 35. So here it talks about employees and non-employees that are subject to the impacts. So here I was looking for, okay, who are the different types of employees to be considered, and then I was able to pick up on this. And where did it find it? So in the report, so it started with page 6. So here, for example, on page 6, it picked up that there are 6,939 staff members and approximately 3,300 people that work as independents in the network. And then if you go back to the report, then this is the information which was being picked up as the internal employees and the non-employees. But then obviously you see that this information is enriched with a lot of extra context, and that extra context is basically coming from, I think it was page 23, which is basically the section that then talks about the human resources. So then it picked up on a lot of different snippets of information that are needed in order to then provide the answer that is needed for this particular data point. And then it basically goes on and it will fill as much of the information as possible. So here, for example, you see that there's a material negative impact, which is flagged, but it's only partially flagged because we were not able to retrieve all of the information. Now, if you have the real double materiality assessment of this bank, then obviously we would be able to pre-fill this a lot more, because I imagine that there are definitely a few more. And then you can really see that they like to highlight the positive elements, because there are a lot more positive elements flagged in the report, and then also here listed in this table. But if and that's basically how it's able to pre-fill the report and be as efficient as possible in getting this reporting done. So that's basically what I wanted to show you, that AI is really helping this process. Obviously, everything which is written here, as Kenneth already mentioned, I mean, this is technology. It is not flawless, so it will always require clients to validate data points so that this is being checked, because it might be the case that if you upload a lot of documents that talk about the same thing, that it might not retrieve the information from the right documents. So there's always that check that needs to happen, but it's so much easier to read and to validate rather than to start from a blank page, figuring out what the legislation wants you to report on, and then trying to figure out what that answer would be. So from that perspective, this is a huge efficiency booster in the CSRD reporting process.
Thanks a lot, Jens. That's very helpful. I saw already in the chat some questions coming in also exactly on the full scope, what you could do on all the other ESRSs and your pricing and so on. But for that, I was already so free to share your email, and I would invite everyone to directly reach out to Jens to discuss those type of questions. We will also share his contacts after the webinar. Maybe one question for you, Jens. Just a lot of questions came in more both for the Carbon+Alt+Delete use cases as the Chrome use cases. What can it do with this type of document? What can it do with a scan? What can it do with a picture? What can it do with an Excel? Maybe, I don't know whether you have an anecdote top of mind of the most crazy format document that you've received and processed from clients so far, to give just an indication on how broad the scope could be.
We've had clients that uploaded almost 100,000 pages across different documents that we were able to shift through in order to identify what is it that we need to report on for the CSRD report. And we've done that, but then it took a bit longer than 2 hours to get the CSRD report out, because there's a lot more indexing to be done. But that was done across 8 different languages as well that we detected throughout those documents. But then basically, I think it was close to 30 hours later, there was a CSRD report which was filled in, and it was we're hitting a completion rate of more than 70%. Now, it doesn't mean that everything is correct, because one of the downsides of having a lot of documents is what I mentioned earlier, is that it might not always pick it from the relevant source. So, and it will typically also report maybe a bit too much, because we will ask to be as complete as possible, but then we'll typically report a bit too much. So a lot of the interactions that customers will do is to remove parts that you typically don't want to report. And so yeah, that was quite a challenge, and but it's proved to work.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I said in the beginning, right? AI is a black box. It is a statistical model in the end. It sometimes surprises you, but based, I think, on the experiences of both Caromia and Carbon+Delete, it more often surprises you in a positive way than in a negative way. But that being said, it can still surprise you also in a negative way. Being mindful of time in the final minute, because I want to stop at the hour, maybe just one final closing. So I want to basically also inform you on the next webinar that we will do in our series. Kyle will put a link in the chat, or you can scan the QR code. But the next one will be on carbon footprinting, both the corporate part that we will offer, but then also the link to product carbon footprint and life cycle analysis. And we're very happy to One-Click LCA on board for the next webinar. And I also want to take a final publicity slide on our community. So this community is open to everyone, not only to Carbon+Delete users, addresses a broad variety of topics related to carbon accounting and beyond. It's basically a Q&A forum for all the carbon sustainability experts out there. With that, I think it's time to stop here. Thanks a lot for joining. We'll share the slides and the recordings later, together with the contact details of me, Hans-Peter, and Jens. The questions that have not yet addressed in the chat, we will get back to you on those. And with this, thanks a lot again for joining and all the questions and interactions in the chat. And we wish you a great continuation of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.